Endocrinology. However strange it might at first appear, the esoteric idea of the dual role of sex and the idea of transmutation is much closer to scientific thought than might be supposed. That is, nearer to modern scientific thought than to the scientific thought of, say, the 19th century. A branch of scientific physiology that is developing into a separate science and throwing new light on other sciences, chiefly on psychology, is endocrinology, or a study of the glands of internal secretion, such as for example the endocrine gland. These studies promise a great deal in the direction of the establishment of properties and causes of our various functions, amongst them the function of sex and its relationship to other functions. The starting point of the doctrine of internal secretions was the work of Claude Bernard, on the glycogenic function between 1848 and 1857, and Addison's account in 1849 of the suprarenal capsules. This led to experiments by Brown-Sequard, who in 1891 introduced the notion of specific substances secreted into the blood by various organs as well as the concept of functional hormonal correlation. Two theories were advanced to explain the mechanism of correlation. The first being the theory of hormones, the presence of which was established experimentally in 1902. The second was the theory of connecting endocrine secretions with the autonomic nervous system. Experiments, both surgical and by injection of gland extracts, were carried out on the adrenals, the thyroid, the parathyroid, and other glands. Attention in the latter part of the 19th century was centered mostly on the pituitary gland, which was visualized as dominating the endocrine system. It was hypothesized that internal secretions control the configuration of the body and are the activators of emotion. The psychological aspect of endocrinology from the point of view of the psychological makeup of an individual appeared later. It should be noted that opinion is divided as to whether endocrinology should include all parts of the body, on the grounds that all organs give off chemical substances to both the blood and lymph, or whether it should include only the ductless glands, together with certain other glands of internal and external secretion. In what follows, endocrinology is taken as the study of glands of internal secretion, and also of the glands of both internal and external secretion. That is, as part of a wider science, hormonology, which studies the internal secretions of all organs. According to the data of endocrinology, all physical properties and functions of man, our growth, nourishment, body structure, and function of different organs, psychic life, intellectual, emotional, and our entire psychic makeup, our activity, energy, and strength, all of these depend upon the properties and character of the activity of all glands of internal secretion, which in their turn are responsible for producing motive power for the working of organs, the nervous system, brain, immune system, and so on. All the external characteristics, everything we can see in a person, their height, skeletal structure, quality of our skin, eyes, ears, hair, voice, respiration, way of thinking, quickness of perception, character, emotionality, willpower, energy, activity, and initiative. All of these depend upon the action of the glands of internal secretion and furthermore reflect their state. Endocrinology made all at once an enormous leap in the study of man, a giant leap, the true significance of which is as yet far from being appreciated or understood. Scientific psychology, the development of which came to a complete standstill at about the end of the 19th century, which in the first decades of the 20th century did not produce a single work worthy of attention, is beginning to acquire new force and to revise all of its theories from the standpoint of the ideas of endocrinology. In the works on endocrinology that have already appeared, there are some interesting attempts at the interpretation of the fate of historical personages from the point of view of the study of their endocrinological type. That is, of the combination of their internal secretions at different periods of their life. As an example of such attempts, it is worth looking at two books by Dr. Berman of New York. In the first of these books, The Glands Regulating Personality, Dr. Berman, having indicated the principles of the endocrinological study of man which he follows, takes several historical personages with regard to whom there exist more or less definite data. The first of these is Napoleon Bonaparte, as known by his portraits, by the memoirs of his physicians, and by the data on the autopsy of his body at the island of St. Helena. On the basis of this data, Dr. Berman gives an endocrinological history of Napoleon, wherein he explains from his point of view, under the influence of which glands of internal secretion the different periods of Napoleon's life passed. Thus Dr. Berman offers explanation for the failure of Napoleon's last campaigns, ending in the catastrophe of Waterloo, by the weakening of the secretions of the pituitary gland that became even more accentuated on the island of St. Helena and completely altered his personality. Later, Dr. Berman examines Nietzsche, Charles Darwin, Oscar Wilde, Florence Nightingale and others. In his second book, The Personal Equation, he examines types that result from the predominance of one or other gland, and considers man as a marionette, controlled by glandular secretions, depicting us as slaves to our hormones. Dr. Berman's books cannot be called scientific. They are speculations on endocrinological themes. However, Dr. Berman's hypotheses come close to the facts that are as yet imagined in philosophy. From a strictly scientific point of view, almost every separate conclusion of Dr. Berman can be refuted or regarded as unproven. However, what will not be refuted and may even be established are the principles upon which he bases his reasoning. These principles will probably remain and form the foundation of some new understanding, new for modern thought but in reality approaching the esoteric more closely. In relation to the problem of infrasex and suprasex, what is of particular interest is the meaning and role of the internal secretion of our sex glands, the effect of testosterone, estrogen, pheromones, serotonin, adrenaline, and endorphins upon all the functions of human beings and upon their other secretions. As established by physiology, before the appearance of endocrinology as a separate science, our sex glands are at the same time glands of external and internal secretion. The internal secretion of sex glands is the chief factor in the creation and regulation of secondary sexual characteristics. This is true to such an extent that in the event of injury to our sex glands, or as in the case of castration, when internal secretions cease or are impaired, secondary characteristics disappear or become modified completely, and the male becomes a degenerate type of infrasex. Thus modern science not only admits the dual role of sex, but bases a great deal upon it, recognizing in the internal secretions of sex glands and hormones, the right factor for the correct function of our entire organism and for a deterioration of function when change or weakening of this secretion takes place. The internal secretion of sex glands is the transmutation already recognized by science. The normal life of an organism and the conservation of secondary characteristics depends upon this transmutation. Every weakening of our secondary characteristics points to a weakening of this transmutation. A considerable weakening or a cessation of transmutation produces infrasex. The esoteric idea differs from modern scientific views only in the admission of the possibility of the transmutation being increased, then brought to a degree of totally incomprehensible and unknown intensity which creates a new type of man. If this new type of man belongs to suprasex, what then does suprasex mean? Attempts at the endocrinological study of historical personages and clinical investigations establish the facts of infrasex, their origin, causes and effects. However, they say nothing about suprasex. Where then can material for the judging of suprasex be sought? On the horizon of our history we see two superhuman figures, Shakyamuni Buddha and the Christ. Whether we take them as real men who actually existed, or as myths, as creations of popular fancy, or esoteric thought, we find in them common features. The story of the life of the Buddha tells us that in youth, Prince Siddhartha was surrounded by a brilliant court filled with beautiful young women, that he was married and had a son, Rahula. He abandoned all of this when he retired into asceticism, and in later life, sex played no part. Except for several apocryphal legends, history has not preserved for us any descriptions of temptations or struggle connected with sex. Jesus is more difficult from this point of view. We know nothing about his sex life. As far as we know, there was no woman in his life. Even during the temptation in the wilderness, the devil does not try to seduce him with feminine wiles. The devil shows him the kingdoms of the world in all their glory, promises a miracle, but does not offer love. Evidently by design, by the idea of the author who created the drama of Christ, Jesus was already beyond these temptations and possibilities. We may then ask ourselves whether Christ and the Buddha were not men of suprasex. There are no grounds that would permit us to classify them as belonging to infrasex. At the same time, both undoubtedly differed from ordinary men. Unfortunately, we have no information about the structure of the body of Jesus and his external characteristics. All the representations of him of the first centuries are quite arbitrary. However, with regard to the Buddha, the position is different, because there exist very exact and detailed descriptions of the structure of his body, and of all his external features and characteristics. These can be examined in the so-called 32 signs of Buddhahood and the 80 minor marks. Concerning these signs there exists a legend, that was in part adopted by writers of the Gospels with relation to Christ. When the Buddha was born, Asita, the old hermit, came down from the Himalayas to Kapilavatthu, and when he entered the palace, he offered the Aga sacrifice at the feet of the babe. Then Asita walked 3 times around the child, took him in his arms and read on his body the 32 signs of Buddhahood, and the 80 minor marks that were visible to his inner sight. Modern Buddhist scholars, on the basis of philological and historical research, consider the 32 signs to be a latter invention. Certainly there can be no doubt that the 32 signs contain much that is conventional, much that is mythology, naive allegory, and much that has been corrupted through oral transmission, in transcription and in translation. However, in spite of all this, an endocrinological study of the 32 signs of the Buddha would be of enormous interest, and it is not impossible that it could lift for us the veil covering the enigma of suprasex. There are several variants of the list of the 32 signs of Buddhahood, or the 32 signs of perfection, as also of the 80 minor marks. In all cases the translation is very doubtful, and there are many interpretations of different signs. What is shared here is a variant, accepted in modern popular Buddhist literature. In transcription, translation, and interpretation many signs have completely lost their meaning and significance. However, first a philological and second a psychological analysis of the more reliable variants may furnish texts, the endocrinological study of which could reveal much that is new and unexpected. The 32 signs of Buddhahood. A well-formed head and forehead. The hair is blue-black and shining. Each curl grows from left to right. Forehead is broad and straight. Has a hair between the 2 eyebrows, turned to the right, it is as white as snow. The eyelashes are like those of a newly born calf. Has shining blue-black eyes. Has 40 teeth, all even. The teeth are close together. The teeth are pure white. His voice is like that of Mahabrahma. He has exquisite taste. His tongue is soft and long. His jaws are like those of a lion. Shoulders and arms are beautifully molded. 7 parts of the body are round and full. The space between the shoulders is well filled out. His skin has a golden color. His arms are long, so that when he stands without bending, his hands can touch his knees. The upper part of his body is like that of a lion. His body is straight like that of Mahabrahma. From each hair sac a single hair grows. These hairs bend to the right at the top. The organs of sex are hidden by nature. The calves of his legs are full and round. His legs are like those of a deer. His fingers and toes are slender and of equal length. His heels are long. The instep of his foot is high. Feet and hands are delicate and long. Fingers and toes are covered with an epidermis. His feet are flat and he stands firmly. Under the soles of his feet 2 shining wheels appear with 1,000 spokes. What deductions from the point of view of endocrinological theories can be made from the study of the 32 signs of Buddhahood? Can any deductions be made at all? One thing is beyond doubt: if we take the 32 signs as a description of a living person, we would be compelled to say that such do not exist. The Buddha combines in himself contradictory features. He has features that seem to point to femininity, others to infantilism, and side by side with these are features that point to an exceptionally strong development of the masculine type. Speaking generally, the Buddha's secondary characteristics are intermixed, and in such combinations they are not met with in life. The Buddha is a strange and a new type of man. As it can already be regarded as established that all external features and characteristics depend upon one or other form of the development of the glands and internal secretion, the picture of the development of the Buddha's internal secretions must be something utterly improbable and new. Furthermore, the internal secretion of the sex glands in his case appears not to be weakened, as it should have been judging by several characteristics, but on the contrary seems to have been intensified to an extreme degree. If this is transmutation, if this is suprasex, does it indicate the course our thought must take in endeavoring to understand the enigma of the evolution of mankind? Does it mean that in the process of evolution, sex energy as it were turns inward, within the organism, and creates in it new life? Capable of ever new, eternal regeneration? If this is the way of the transformation or evolution of man, it means that man is a strange biological type, whose sex period, the period of propagation, belongs to the lower, or middle phase of transformation. If we imagine a butterfly whose function of propagation, instead of belonging to the butterfly, belonged to the caterpillar, then the butterfly in relation to the caterpillar would be suprasex. This means that the function of propagation and consequently the function of sex would be unnecessary in the butterfly, and would cease to act. This would be the biological scheme of man's stages in evolution. Is this possible? Is this probable? These questions cannot be answered with the material at present available. The psychological picture of man's approach to suprasex is, however, a little clearer for us. There are in life strange emotions and strange sensations, inexplicable from an ordinary point of view. In love and in all sex sensations there is a strange melancholy, and a strange sadness in post-coital depression. The more a man feels, the stronger in him is this sensation of farewell, this sensation of parting. This sensation of parting arises from the fact that in a man or woman of strong feeling, sex sensations awaken certain new states of consciousness, new emotions. These new emotions change the emotions of sex and cause them to fade and disappear. In this lies the secret to the deep melancholy of the most vivid sex sensations. There is a certain autumnal taste in them, the taste of something that must pass, must die, must cede its place to something else. This something else is the new consciousness, for the definition and description of which there are no words, but which of all we know, only sex sensations approach. Mystical states possible to all show a very strange relationship between mystical experiences and experiences of sex. Mystical sensations undoubtedly have a taste of sex. To put it more correctly, of all ordinary human experience only sex sensations approach those that we may call mystical. Of all we know in life, only in love is there a taste of the mystical, a taste of ecstasy. Nothing else in our life brings us so near to the limit of human possibilities, beyond which begins the unknown. In this lies without doubt the chief cause of the terrible power of sex over human souls. However, at the same time, sex sensations disappear in the light of mystical experiences. The first sensation of mystical experience intensifies sex sensations, however the further waves of the light that a person begins to see, completely absorb and cause to disappear those small sparks of sensation that before seemed to them a blaze of love and passion. Consequently, in true mysticism there is no sacrifice of feeling. Mystical sensations are sensations of the same category as the sensations of love, only infinitely higher and more complex. Love and sex are but a foretaste of mystical sensations, and it is clear that the foretaste must disappear when there comes that which has been anticipated. But it is equally clear that struggle with the foretaste, the sacrifice of the foretaste, the giving up of the foretaste, cannot bring nearer or hasten anything. Whether the struggle with normal sex is necessary for the attainment of suprasex, or whether on the contrary, suprasex can be attained in the conditions of a normal functioning of sex is a point on which the ideas of esoteric systems, as has been indicated before, differ very strongly. As any contradiction between systems of esoteric origin is essentially impossible, this difference can only have one meaning. This meaning is that there are types of people for whom the attainment of suprasex is possible only through a struggle against sex, for their sex is not sufficiently coordinated with other functions and does not evolve by itself. Then there are other types of people for whom the attainment of suprasex is possible without the struggle against sex, because their sex is transformed gradually in accordance with the transformation of other functions. Ordinary knowledge lacks sufficient material for determining the course of this transformation, nor for determining the essential nature of suprasex. Only an entirely new study of man started and conducted on the condition of the abandonment of all petrified theories and principles can discover ways to the understanding of true evolution.